Okay.
Yeah, we are live and you can share your slides with the share option there.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Dr. Usman, let me know when you have shared your slides so that then I can start the session.
Yeah, let's get started, and I'll share the slides during when we get into the discussion. There are
Okay. Okay. So, hello everyone. My name is Amir Abbas, and today we are going to continue with our series on time management. The topic of discussion today will be prioritization. The topic of discussion today will be prioritization as a skill. In our life, we have so many options, starting from day to day affairs to deciding affairs concerning our life's goal and vision. We mostly do not know how to prioritize different options. In this video, we are going to discuss how to effectively use the most different tactics for prioritization. With us, we have Dr. Usman, who is a master of managing his time and tasks effectively. He holds graduate degrees from three different fields from top institutions of the world that include Khyber Medical College, Peshawar, Pakistan, Harvard School of Public Health, and UC Berkeley School of Information. He has been an academic researcher, manager, and a thought leader, and has been doing all this working full time with full-time job and spending time with family. Today we are going to talk about prioritization as my. First of all, thanks a lot, Dr. Usman, for giving us time again on this weekend morning.
Of course. Thank you, Amir, for the intro, and it's my pleasure.
Okay, so without wasting any further time and to keep the session on track, my first question to you is why something as simple as prioritization is important to be when discussed.
Sure. So, yeah, let's actually back up a little bit in order to understand why we are at this point and say what do we mean by prioritization, and it's coming from the word priority. The interesting fact about this is that the word it used to be priority, not priorities. So it was always in the past considered to be something about a single priority. So there was one thing that was the most important. However, as our lives have gotten more complicated over the past century or century and a half, and there are so many things happening in our world now, it's gotten very complex. We are knowledge workers. Many of us are knowledge workers. We have started using this in a different way, and now we keep talking about priorities. That all means that we are talking about more than one thing. And when you have more than one thing, obviously, then you have to figure out what is more important, what has higher priority. So, with that background, where we are today in our complex lifestyle, we need to deal with this, whether we like it or not. Every day, everybody has so many things to do. So you've got to choose what you're going to do. So there are two reasons. There are many reasons, but two things that I will note for why prioritization is important, or why this is such an important skill. And the first one is basically a realization that you cannot do everything. There is so much to do. There are so many good ideas that you could work on. You've got your daily responsibilities. If you have a family, you know that you've got a lot of responsibilities. So it's a realization that you cannot do everything, but you should be able to do what are the most important things. And then the second idea is, and this is very important, prioritizing means that you are choosing something. So you have an ability to choose. It leads to proactivity. So if you are, instead of reacting to whatever is coming at you and you're just doing whatever is right in front of you, if you have the ability to choose and say, okay, no, I'm going to do these two things because these are more important to me or my family or my life, you are then being more proactive, and you're choosing, so you have a sense of control. And I think that's very important when we talk about success and personal growth, and um, executing on our plans and trying to get to some higher goal. This kind of sense of control and being able to choose is extremely important.
Right. So, in the next point is that when we are talking about our life, so somebody will think from the perspective of the end of life goal. Somebody will think of some objectives, and somebody will talk about day-to-day activities, weekly activities, monthly activities, or for some students like semester level activities. So, at what level we should exercise prioritization, or at least think of that as a conceptual matter?
Sure. So let me share a quick slide to explain my idea here.
Yeah, sure. You should be able to share it with the help of the share option. And um, so in
Okay.
yeah, yeah, in the meanwhile, as you are sharing the option, the slides, let me make a very quick announcement, is that those of you who are here live, you can put your questions in the comments. We'll be taking the questions in the end, and we'll be projecting them to the screen and then reading them and letting our speaker to answer them. Yeah, Dr. Usman, are you having some trouble in sharing the slides?
Yeah, I think my laptop is not allowing me to share,
Okay.
but I think we can do without it. It just
Uh, I think I do have those. Let me see if I can. If I can, give me a minute.
okay.
Maybe I will be able
Sure.
to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, so we
yeah,
can keep talking. It's
just
an important idea. When we talk about prioritization,
yeah.
we have to think about what level you're applying it to. And by level, I mean there's a scale from a daily kind of thing, like
Hmm,
what's happening in a day,
hmm,
weekly, monthly, or quarterly, and yearly, and multiple years, and then life goals or lifetime things that you think over a lifetime. What is my purpose? That kind of question at a very high level, and all the way down to your daily stuff, like I have to pay the bills tomorrow. Between that, there are so many levels, and the question is, what's the place where you can best apply prioritization?
hmm.
And go to the third or fourth slide.
Okay. So right.
Next, and next.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of a scale. If you think about the level or granularity, or which level you're trying to apply this, and it's it's tricky because you can think of applying this at any of these levels, and it makes sense. You can apply it at a daily level. If you have a weekly plan, you can think about, in this week, what are my priorities, and then go up and you say, okay, let's say you're thinking about career planning. Typically, that would be 1 to 3 or 3 to 5 years, where you're thinking, okay, these are the things I want to move towards in the next 3 to 5 years, and in terms of my career. And then there's life time, like very high level purpose kind of questions. And when you get to that point, you're not prioritizing tasks, then you're prioritizing goals. So what are your goals? That's at a lifetime level question. That's different from what you're doing at a daily level. Now, here's the thing, and we're doing this talk largely for people who are interested in getting started with these kind of skills, and they want to improve their time management and life management skills. So you could start with the daily, and you say, okay, today what are the things I have to do, and the next day you ask again the same question. But that is too small a level for you to think about where you're moving in the longer term. So although you have to do it at daily level, but that's not enough. Then let's go to the other extreme. if you start talking about these are my life goals and these are the 10 or 5 things that I want to achieve, or this is the kind of person I want to be, and so on, and then you try to work from there downwards, it gets very overwhelming very quickly. And the other thing is, um, let's say somebody says, I want to be a successful politician in some place. That doesn't take care of what's the next immediate thing at the daily level that they have to deal with. So you kind of have to do all of it, but when you're getting started, it's easy to get overwhelmed. So I typically go to the weekly level. You switch to the next slide.
Okay.
At a weekly level, it's a kind of a balance, and maybe for some people it's a monthly or a slightly longer time frame that they want to apply prioritization at. I find that it's the easiest point to apply prioritization. And why do I say that? It's because a week is a small enough time frame where you can also think about your daily things a little bit. So you can say, okay, what are the most important things in a week, in the next week, that I want to get done? And at the same time, when you start thinking about a slightly longer time frame than the daily time frame, then immediately you're going to ask the question, okay, these are the 2 or 3 things that I want to get done in this week. Are these the most important things for my longer term goals? So there's a connection to longer term goals, right? So that's why I propose that people who are just getting started with a new system and they haven't tried this before, I always suggest get started with a weekly level of prioritization and then try to expand that.
Right. So you said that you have to start, like, you prefer it to be started at the weekly level. What do you suggest? Like, at which stage should I move to the monthly or higher level? I mean, for how long do you suggest that I should keep on practicing it for the weekly level and then decide, okay, now I can think of more time and prioritization?
Yeah. So I think the weekly prioritization and weekly review, as David Allen calls it, that's an exercise you will always do. Like, you don't stop doing it. You always do that. It's one of the most valuable things that I've started doing in my life, and it gives me a sense of control and proactivity within a given week. And once you do this for a few weeks and you get comfortable, it's going to take a while. When you sit down on a Sunday evening and try to go through all your stuff, it might take you an hour, 2 hours. It takes me 2 hours usually. So it's a good deal of time, but it's worth it. So once you are familiar with the process, you get used to it and you get a sense of, okay, I can understand what are the most important things for me to do in the next week. Then you automatically start asking question, okay, are these the things that are most important for me in a longer time frame? And that could be a month, a quarter, or a year. And then at some point, when you feel comfortable, you have to actually start planning a little bit formally. Okay, this year, what are my goals? And then you try to, when you have that kind of thinking, then you can start connecting that with your weekly or monthly prioritization. Okay, because then you'll ask the question, okay, I'm having to do these 5 things in this month. Are these the things that are moving me towards my yearly goal or not?
Right. You said that spend 2 hours on a Sunday for this task, for this specific task. Don't you think that's a lot of time? Like, on a Sunday or a weekend, I have to take out 2 hours of my time and specifically prioritize my next week's task. What do you think about this?
It seems like a lot of time. I think it's very much worth it. It's better than losing the whole week. So what that means is, if I don't do a good prioritization, and this applies to people who have to deal with a lot of different projects at the same, they're multitasking and they're trying to do many things at a time. They need to understand what is the most important thing. So if you don't do that exercise, and when your week starts and things come at you pretty fast, you're getting 30 emails a day, you've got messages coming and people calling, you've got assignments, you've got other stuff. And if you don't have that compass that you create during a weekly review, then it's very easy to get sidetracked and the weekend pass by and you might end up with not actually getting the most important things done. So I think that's why the 2 hours might seem like a lot. I don't think it is a lot.
Right. So another thing which happens is that our life is extremely constrained by external factors. And for example, I have to stay in the US, I have to seek a job, I have to do some jobs, and all of that. With all of those constraints, how would you fit in the prioritization in the along with these constraints in mind, keeping these constraints in mind?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think what you're talking about, we can call those as constraints on our planning process. So we have certain goals. Everybody has goals, and there are constraints. There are some realities of life that we don't control, and there are actually many things that we don't control. Nobody knows tomorrow who's going to be here. So obviously, there's a level where we just don't have any control. So that's something that we don't change. We can plan for a little bit, but you cannot plan for everything. So one way to think about it is having some flexibility in your plans and having some flexibility in your mind. Things may not go as you plan, and you should have some anticipation of that, and especially when you're thinking about a little bit of longer term planning. Say 1 to 3 years, you're thinking, okay, this is where I'm going to be. This is my objective. It may be like an academic goal. It may be a personal goal. It may be a career goal that you're moving towards. It may not happen. Things might change drastically. Last year we got COVID. A lot of people's plans were destroyed, I would say. There are so many things that didn't happen that could have happened if we were not in this pandemic. So in that kind of situation, if somebody has a very rigid plan and they haven't kept some amount of flexibility in planning, and not just in planning, but also in anticipating that this might not happen, that hurts a lot. So when you're planning, be realistic. It's best to always be working towards what is the most important thing. You should know that plans will change according to your situation, so you should be flexible enough for that. The other thing I'll say is your goals, your longer term goals, or what you want to achieve in life shouldn't really change too much. So you might have a life goal of helping people in a certain way. Let's say you want to stay in healthcare and you want to help people in certain ways. There are 200 different ways of doing that. So maybe your plan for a certain job or a certain specific career does not realize, but there may be other ways you can achieve that goal. So in this kind of situation, we want to think more about goals.
Right. Now we come to the key question of our discussion: is that how to prioritize? Is there any framework or there is any tools for me to prioritize? And when we have discussed it, that at which level we should use for a week, let's suppose. So how do I see what is important for me this week or not? What do you say about this thing?
Yeah. So I'm not going to invent any new tool. There is the Eisenhower's Matrix that is very famous, and it was popularized by Stephen Covey. I love this framework of urgent versus important. And I'll explain this quickly, and then I'll jump onto two big issues that people face when using this matrix. So first, what is urgent versus non-urgent is pretty straightforward. That's the easy part. If something has to get done by a certain date or time, that defines its urgency. You've got an exam that is fixed in date, usually it's not going to change. If that exam is coming up soon, that's an urgent thing for you. The other one is the scale of important versus not important. And that means things that is different from urgency. So whether something needs to get done soon is a different question than is it important for you or not. So the matrix looks pretty simple and straightforward, and we can think about examples like what is urgent and important. Uh, Somebody's having a heart attack, it's an urgent and important thing that they go to the hospital and take care of that. Uh, the example of not urgent but also important is typically things that you do as a preventive measure or things that are longer term thinking and improvements in habits. For example, taking the same example from healthcare, um, exercising daily or eating healthy is not an urgent task, but it is extremely important. And that's where a lot of us skimp on these things. So we will skip things that are important but not urgent because they're not urgent. So we get stuck in that urgent box. And then if you go down, not important but urgent are things that you just have to do. They don't add specific value to your life. You have to do laundry. Okay. So that's urgent but not important. And then the fourth box is things that I consider pretty much useless. So some kind of, spending time on social media aimlessly is something that is neither urgent nor important. It does not add value to your life. And that's my perspective, at least. If you're a media professional, maybe that's a different thing. So it's personalized. It's everybody has to ask themselves this question. Now, if we move forward from this, there are two big problems. If you switch to the next slide, that gives a summary of that. There are two challenges with this matrix. First of all, when you say urgent versus important, the urgent piece is easy. Important piece is not so straightforward. So this matrix is assuming that you know what is important for you. So I would encourage you, when you start using this matrix, ask yourself the question, do I know what is important for me? And for some people, it might be straightforward, but for a lot of people, it's not very straightforward. You have to think about, okay, what are my goals? And that's how I assess what is important for me or not. And then the second piece here is, which can get confusing if we start mixing the time horizons or time frames. So it's very possible that you start applying this to your weekly planning and you ask the question, okay, what is important for me in this week? And then suddenly you start thinking about your longer term goals and your life goals. And 2 hours later, you've been thinking about it and you are more confused than ever and overwhelmed, because now you're starting to think, okay, I'm not really doing the stuff that I should be doing given my life goals or given my career goals. And that's a good realization. The problem is that that's not going to take care of your immediate daily and weekly stuff. So you do need to get over your week somehow and get clarity to be able to think about longer term goals. So what my suggestion is, try not to mix the time frames when you're applying this. So when you're doing weekly planning, ask the question, what is most important for me in this week? And that should make it a lot easier to answer that question. And if you feel like whatever you're doing in a given week is not actually moving towards your longer term goals, that is definitely a problem, and that you have to think about and address but there might be things in your week that you just have to get done right now. You can't suddenly change your job. You can't suddenly move out of your career if you realize that's a problem. So try to use the same time frame when you're asking the question, what is important?
Right. And I think as we were talking about, another point also came to my mind is that you alluded to the point that uh, making a decision on what is important is not easy. But to me, for some, even the urgency is also very subjective. For example, um, some people may be very last minute person. Like if you have something on the top of your head, then we will consider it as urgent. And others may be precastinators, like they will be like starting something like 3 months before the deadline. So do you agree that that area is also very much subjective and pretty much dependent on the person?
Yeah, I think that's a question of how confident you are in your estimation. If you are pretty confident, you think you can get something done on the last day, just before the deadline, maybe that works for you. But and it's subjective again. What you think as urgent depends on you, and it depends on the task.
Hmm.
So urgent for paying a bill when you have the money in your bank and you just need to go online and pay something it's a small task. You just need to get it done, right? Versus a long presentation that you have to deliver tomorrow and you haven't prepared for it. That's a different problem. Then that is urgent, and that's a big urgent piece there. So that actually is a good segue into one of the next points that I wanted to talk about, which is the question of effort and routine. So one of the things that I like to do is try to estimate when I'm doing my weekly planning, try to estimate for a given task how long it's going to take me, how much effort it's going to take me. And effort is kind of a vague word. Usually we mean how long it's going to take it, but it's a little more than that. It's a conflation of duration and complexity. So complex tasks take more brain power. There are some shallow tasks that you can do while you're sitting with your family, or well, you shouldn't be doing something else while you're sitting with your family, but maybe you're watching news or something, or you can take care of a few things by on the way. But effort is something that I try to estimate for tasks that I do. And what I've learned is that you get better with time. When you start doing, when you're doing certain type of things again and again, you get better. Over time, you get better. Maybe you estimated that this presentation is going to take you 30 minutes to prepare, and it didn't take 30 minutes, it took 60 minutes. So then you got to recalibrate. Next time you have something similar, you'll have an idea of how long this is going to take. So you get better with that. And the reason you want to do that is it's not enough to say, okay, these are the 5 things that I want to get done in my week. Then you've got to find time for that. Okay, when are you going to do that? So the more specific you are with your commitments, the better. So ideally, when you know the 2 or 3 things that you want to get done in the next week, then you also look at your calendar and you try to find where this is going to fit, how I'm going to get this done. And then the other idea is about routine. Some things are done better in mornings versus evenings, and some people work better in morning versus evening. Some are evening people, some are morning people. So you also want to take into account that factor.
Right. So now it brings to another important avenue of this, because we have, in the last session, we discussed to-do list, and in this session, we are talking about prioritization. How do we merge the two? Like, I have a to-do list with the help of my, let's assume, virtual platform, and then I have this Eisenhower Matrix. So how do I merge the two to identify the most important tasks for the week?
Yeah. So I think it's pretty straightforward. We use the matrix on a weekly level for using it for your weekly review prioritization. Then you know what is there in your next week that are the most important. And when I say most important, we can say most important and not urgent things. There are most important urgent things. Usually those will be tied to some date and time. So those should always already be on your calendar actually. And then the most important but not urgent things, you want to find time for those in your calendar, or if you're using a to-do list. So I can say you should use the weekly exercise to populate your to-do list. And if you're using a virtual tool for this purpose, then that can easily, you can go into you can refresh the list every day. You have a kind of a fluid tool where you don't need to throw away the daily list and then create a new one. So it just stays there and you just check off tasks.
Right. And so then there is an important problem of avoiding distractions. Like we have so many distractions. Suddenly another email came to me. There is a new opportunity. There's a grant opportunity, and there's so many there. And distractions can be external. They can be internal. For example, all of a sudden I think that I got a very good idea, which I think should be acted on immediately. So how do you avoid those distractions?
So I think avoiding distractions is a separate topic in itself. There are strategies people use uh, when we're talking about prioritization. The one thing that I will say is, if you have not done a good job in prioritizing, that means you have not convinced yourself that what you put at the top of your list is indeed the most important thing for you that day or week or whatever your time frame is. That can easily get ruined with distractions. So the one thing that I would suggest in the context of prioritization is make the effort, put in the time to really understand what your priorities are for that given time frame. And when you know that you have exactly the right things at the top of your list, then it will be harder for distractions to sway you from the path that you have selected.
Right. And I think that is kind of most of the stuff for this discussion. I think what I would like to do is to go over the Eisenhower matrix once again, because that is perhaps one of the key factor, or one of the key takeaway from this discussion. And I see a lot of points being a couple of points being raised in the chat as well. So you alluded to this urgent and important metrics, but I would want you to go over it once more, because this is something very important. And to my understanding, the specific question which I'm trying to ask at this particular point is that there is the fourth cell, which is not urgent, not important, right?
Mhm.
And as you give the example of say using the social media, just browsing on YouTube or things like that, which all of us do on a regular basis. Uh, and like, do you think? I mean, if I'm not a media person, but I do spend a lot of time in that, and that, do you think I should be reconsidering my habits and just trying to monitor my habits in a better way so that I can use that time for something uh,
I
more?
think that's a great question. And this points out another issue with this matrix that is not so obvious. So what do you put in that quadrant for not urgent, not important? And I gave the example of social media, using social media like Facebook and Twitter and other things like that. I give that example from my perspective. So I find it an absolute waste of time for myself. So I don't use Facebook. Maybe once in a while I'll just check in because there are a lot of friends there. I don't use Twitter. I don't have an Instagram account, and I also don't keep WhatsApp on my main screen. It's to the side on a separate screen, and The notifications are always turned off. That's one of the worst thing that I think you can do to your productivity, is having those red badges show up and entice you to click on it, because that's how they make these products sticky, and they lure you into keep to keep clicking and tapping and swiping, and you keep going, and you release a little bit of dopamine in your brain because you feel good about that swipe, and then you keep doing it. Uh, However, I think whatever you have in that box, if you are confused whether or not it's really a not urgent, not important thing, you should ask the question, why are you doing that thing? So let's say if you are watching a movie, do you put it in that fourth box or not? I would ask the question, why do you watch a movie? So if it's for a good entertainment purpose and you're just trying to relax, or you're trying to have a good time with your family, that's probably not in that fourth box. It's valuable to you in some way. So you want to put things in that fourth box that are not creating any value for you. And so it's a little bit more involved question. It's a little bit deeper. You have to think about, okay, what am I doing with social media? Is it important to me, to my goals? Is it adding value to my life? Even if it's like, adding fun to your life, that's, if you think that's important, then that's important.
Right, and I think same applies for any kind of entertainment, right? Because entertainment is also important for leading a healthy life. So ideally, I think that part of the matrix would be empty, right? If somebody has thought of clearly of their work, prioritization.
Nobody is perfect. So I know everybody has something in that fourth box, and we try to get rid of things from there. The question of entertainment is interesting because I try to look for things that lead to happiness more than pleasure. Pleasure is instantaneous. These are things like that will make you feel good in the moment. Happiness is longer term. So that's the lens I take when I look at that fourth box. And in terms of entertainment, what entertainment is valuable to me, to my life, versus what is not.
Right. For those of you who are watching us live, if you want to ask us some questions, you can put them in the comments. We are not taking them, the questions. I think there's a comment or a question is that what I or most people do in routine fit it not important, not urgent box. And I think this is exactly what we were just talking about, was that, yeah, and that should ideally be empty. Uh, then there was another question. What is the best approach, communication way to say no to a task given by your senior or colleague? I think this is, we discussed in our private chats, that this is something extremely important, maybe a topic of its own. What do you say about this point?
Yeah, it's a larger topic. There are many strategies. What I found is that if you have a good inventory of all the things that you're supposed to do, then you can go to your colleague or your boss and say, these are the 2,500 things that I'm supposed to do, and that's why it's difficult for me to take on this another task that you're asking me to do. But that means that you're able to say, what else are you doing? Why are you not able to take on this task? That's one simple way. Although that means that you are keeping track of things.
Uh, okay. Do you think that it would be very simple like that? Okay, like there are places which are very ethical and there are rules for work, but there are places, especially in the developing countries, which are the workplace is extremely abusive, and like you will have a boss, he will shout at you, and he will say, okay, I've told you things. And we practically have, all of us have kind of, when we have worked in developing countries, we kind of somewhere in our life we have dealt up with such kind of situation. At least I have worked under some situation like that, when you say, or even very respectively bring those thing up, your boss is going to be smarter than you, right? Like he's going to maneuver or trying to manipulate you in a way, um, to counter your no argument. So how do you suggest to say no on those abusive environments?
Yeah, so I think we're off on a tangent from the prioritization discussion, but a couple of things that I can quickly say from my experience is number one, you want to get out of that kind of place. If you are in such a place, that you should try to find another place that is better. The other thing that when you say the boss is smarter than you, I think the boss is not being smarter than you if he or she is trying to make you do things that you're not able to complete or you cannot deliver in quality. I think that's going to, in long term, hurt both him or her and your work and your outputs, and not going to be good for the department, organization, company, whatever. So yeah, I think that's not a good place to be in. And I know what you're describing as examples, because I've been in those situations, and I've decided to move out of such places.
Right. And I think this is not a question, but a comment. I had same question related to the force. So thank you for asking this. And with this, I think we do not have many questions right now. So with perhaps it's time for us, because we do not have any other questions. And it was a very fruitful discussion. I will be thankful to I'm thankful to Dr. Usman for taking out time on this weekend morning and talking about this such an important topic with us. We'll be continuing these discussions. If you have any feedback, you can, if you are watching the recording of this discussion, you can put your feedback in the comments of this discussion, and also suggest to us that what are the areas in task prioritization or time management which you think are important and you would want us to conduct a session on them. With that, I'm once again thankful to Dr. Usman Raza for giving us time on this weekend morning, and I would like to ask you if you want to say anything else before we call this session off.
Thank you so much, Amir. It's been a pleasure talking about to this audience about this important topic. I would just say, the one thing you can take away from this discussion: start doing a weekly review, start doing a weekly prioritization of what is in front of you. I think that's the one thing that if you take away from this discussion, that will be the best thing that you will do.
With that, it's time to end this discussion. We will see you next time. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you are notified whenever we schedule such an event. Take care for the time being. Bye and Allah Hafiz.